Hello, spellcasters of all shapes and sizes. My name is Chance, and welcome to my spellbook. Before we get into the fantastic spell we have prepared today, I just want to say I'm sorry for the hiatus. I was gonna do a update video, and I still might, but I don't know if I have enough thoughts to really justify one at this point, but just be expecting some news at the end of this video and periodically throughout other videos as well as be sure to stay updated on the community feed. It's kind of the most convenient place for me to make announcements these days, so just bear that in mind and make sure you're subscribed so you get notified of that. But in any case, today we have quite arguably one of my most favorite spells in all of 5e. We're talking about Leomund's Tiny Hut. Now, this spell of 3rd level is usable by the Bard and the Wizard, as so far as to say it's found on their spell lists, and it is found in the Player's Handbook. Now, Leomund is one of those famous wizards in the D&D universe, very similar to Mordenkainen in that regard. But this spell, let me tell you, ludicrously popular. This spell alone, in my opinion, justifies taking the Ritual Caster feat. Just on its own, the spell is most commonly used for removing one of the biggest tools out of most DM's toolboxes, and I'll get into what that is in a little bit here. But all you need to know, great spell, highly recommend taking it if you have access to it. But hopefully you'll be able to understand why in the next couple steps here. Without further ado, let's take a look at its mechanics now. Its effect at a glance. Create an invulnerable, climate-controlled dome up to 9 creatures can fit in. Creatures and objects that were within the area when the spell was cast can pass through the dome. The cast time is 1 minute, and it can be ritual casted, so not to consume a spell slot. The range is self, and the radius is 10 feet, which is quite sizable. The duration is a full 8 hours. Now, what else in the D&D universe is 8 hours? Why, yes, keen students. It's a long rest. That's how most people use this spell. Absolutely incredible. Its components are the Holy Trinity, verbal, somatic, and material. If you're curious about that material component, it is a small crystal bead. However, it's going to be worth noting that there's no gold price attached to that, and it doesn't say that it consumes the crystal at any point, so really any focus or pouch of materials should work just fine, or pouch of components, sorry, should work just fine. And the school's evocation, which is a little strange at a glance, but I suppose it is a force thing more than anything else, so it is what it is. Now let's move on to its full description here and talk about some of the finer points on this spell. A 10-foot radius, immobile dome of force springs into existence around and above you and remains stationary for the duration. The spell ends if you leave its area. 9 creatures of medium size or smaller can fit inside the dome with you. The spell fails if its area includes a larger creature or more than 9 creatures. Creatures and objects within the dome when you cast the spell can move through it freely. All other creatures and objects are barred from passing through it. Spells and other magical effects can't extend through the dome or be cast through it. The atmosphere inside the space is comfortable, dry regardless of the weather outside. Until the spell ends, you can command the interior to become dimly lit or dark. The dome is opaque from the outside, of any color you choose, but it is transparent from the inside. So essentially, you can look out, but no one else can look in. Needless to say, there's a lot of components of this spell that seem to suggest flavorful elements, but can be abused to some extent or another. One of the major things I want to point out is this spell only ends if you leave its area. That is so far as to say, the one that cast the spell to some function or another, and that's important for a little bit later on, so just bear it in the back of your head. Another interesting thing about this spell's description is although it does specify the amount of creatures that can be contained within the dome, it doesn't mention any requirements over objects that are contained within the dome. Meaning, so long as it can fit within a 10-foot radius dome, you should be able to put it in there and protect it from virtually everything. And another thing worth pointing out is the spell specifies that spells and magical effects can't extend through it. However, seeing as how objects can move through it freely, it does open up the spell for some really interesting exploits. Now, let's move on and discuss what some of those exploits might be in the alternative use section. The most common way I've seen this spell used, bar none, at least maybe not used, but the most common way I've seen this spell try to be cheesed is by using it as some kind of a tank or bunker or something of that nature, just virtually impenetrable, but able to send out missiles, be the arrows, bolts, what have you, even rocks or anything that can be thrown or launched. So long as it's not magic, it can pass through, but nothing else can pass through towards you. However, an interesting way around this, if you're a DM and if your party's struggling with this, since the arrows or javelins or whatever they're throwing at the enemy would have had to be within the dome when the spell was cast, there's nothing to stop from the attacking creatures from picking up said javelin or arrow or what have you and using them on the party. Now, this isn't something that low intelligence creatures would likely do, although if they had some kind of guidance or if they had some form of tactical knowledge, then they might be able to do this, and it would kind of thwart the party's attempts to use it as an impenetrable shield. It's really interesting. I've had to do it, or something along those lines, once or twice, but usually party members are pretty quick to learn. It's also not a very fun way to do combat, so most people get sick of it relatively quickly, but neither here nor there. And another creative way to use this spell is to actually use it to provide medical attention to those within it. This is kind of a last-ditch effort, and it pairs well with an interesting combo I'm going to mention in a couple minutes here, but just so you know, it is an option. I've personally used it to great effect with a couple of my characters. One of my current characters has a medical background, so he's probably going to use this spell similarly. And another great way to use it is to use it as a means of diplomacy. This is especially useful if you're dealing with high-tense political feuds. You can serve as an arbiter between two opposing factions and have their leaders in the same room when you cast the dome, and they're stuck in the dome with each other, and they don't have to worry about assassination attempts or foreign interests getting involved. Kind of like the Cone of Silence from, what's it called? I was watching it the other day, but it's a spy movie. Johnny English, that's it. The Cone of Silence from Johnny English is kind of similar inspiration of that. Now, there is another alternative use. I didn't really know how to draw this one out, so you're just going to have to bear with me here. Remember how earlier I mentioned that the spell ends if you leave its area, right? So whoever cast the spell, when they leave, then it gets dispelled, but while they're inside, it's active for 8 hours. There's nothing, as far as I've been able to tell, to stop you from partnering this up with Glyph of Warding. Now, granted, it's an easy way to burn through spell slots, but if you're playing something like a Coffee Lock or a high-level wizard or something to that effect, you can essentially create areas using the glyphs that will serve as almost instant bunkers, if that makes sense. So if you're in danger or a party member's in danger, they can run to one of these glyphs of wardings that's set to activate the stored spell when a party member approaches it, and as soon as they enter within that 10-foot radius, Leomund's tiny hut is cast on them and gives them a chance to either provide support through the bunker method I talked about earlier, or heal themselves up, or even use the grapple action to drag a friendly or even an enemy, who knows, given the circumstances, to the tiny hut and activate it over them, where they can then administer aid or interrogate or what have you. It's a really interesting combo. It's one I haven't seen done, and it's one that I haven't really had the opportunity to do. I will make a mental note to attempt it in one of my future games. It's a good way to kind of get under the DM skin a little bit, though, at least that one in particular, just because it's kind of an escape no matter what. Then again, you could always make the argument that shortening the rope for rope trick functions very similar to this, so I don't know, take it with a grain of salt. But most commonly, this is used to guarantee long rests. Bar none, that's the most common use for this. It's very similar to the alarm spell, as far as to say it serves as an added measure of protection. Can it be dispelled? Yeah, I guess, but is it likely to be dispelled? No, probably not. And if it is, then, you're probably dealing with a caster, and if you're sleeping, you're probably all grouped up, and you're probably going to get hit by a fireball not too long after. So, you know what? It is what it is, but it's certainly a great spell. Now, let's move on to some announcements here. First and foremost, the biggest one, bar none, is I've been undertaking writing some one-shots. It takes me a decent amount of time to write them up, but they're pretty good as far as I can tell. I've had a lot of my Adventures League friends test them out, and they all seem to really like them, so I hope you guys like them as well. They're only $1, but your first one's free if you use code WELCOME. Just spell how it is, capitals don't really matter. And let me know what you think. I have 2 up there now. I have 5 that are drafted, though, so I expect them to be up in the next couple weeks or so, and I'll notify you via the community tab. So just make sure you're subscribed so you get notified of that. I want to do giveaways with them periodically, so it'll be pretty cool. They're both about 30 pages in length. They should take between I think 1 to 5 sessions, depending on the speed that the party's going at and how long your sessions are, but it's quite a bit of content, so that's gonna be about it for today. If you have any thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, stories, or alternative uses of your own, please feel free to put them down beneath in the comments section. Really looking forward to hear what you guys have to say about this spell. It's one of my personal favorites, and it's a fan favorite of almost every caster who has access to it. So, yeah, and I mean, with the ritual caster feat, anyone can. So, I don't know. I think it's worth it. That being said, see you guys later. Thank you so much, and as always, happy casting, my friends.